Dobrý den. Jmenuji se Monika Davisová. Jsem americká diplomatka na velvyslanectví USA. Very happy to be here vitite v americké centru. It's actually my first week here in the Czech Republic, and I can't think of a better event that I am able to open here at the American Center. So thank you all for coming and for joining us today, both in person and on Zoom, for this very special event, Bridging Continents, the Mestenhauser Blueprint for the Future of International Education. I'm very pleased to welcome you all. I know we have some very distinguished visitors here today who have traveled from very far away, so thank you for joining us. I know we have people here from Czech universities, civil society, the Czech government, as well as distinguished guests from the Netherlands, the US, and other countries. So thank you all. And many special thanks, of course, go to the Mestenhauser Institute for International Collaboration for organizing today's agenda in collaboration with the US Embassy. So today, of course, we gather to celebrate and honor the remarkable contributions of Josef, I think he went by Joe, Mestenhauser, a distinguished Czech American scholar and diplomat. Born in 1925 in Czechoslovakia at the time, Mestenhauser was a 4-time Fulbright scholar. That really amazed me. That's quite an achievement. He was also a visionary, of course, in the field of international education and a dedicated supporter of Czech-American relations. His pioneering work at the University of Minnesota and his role as the honorary counsel for the Czech Republic in Upper Midwest, appointed by President Václav Havel, have left certainly a lasting and indelible mark on global education and diplomatic ties for our two countries. I was reading his obituary earlier on the University of Minnesota's website, which is still there, and you can really tell how beloved he was in his community. So very impressive person, and I'm very happy we're here celebrating his legacy. We're particularly honored today to have with us Mrs. Patricia Mestenhauser, who will share insights into her father's legacy. Our esteemed panelists, thank you all for joining us. We'll further explore Joe's multifaceted impact as a mentor, as a scholar, and as a diplomat, and shedding light on how his work continues to influence international education and cooperation. Certainly now more than ever in our simultaneously divided and connected world, there's really truly a need for authentic and meaningful international cooperation, international understanding, communication, and education. And Joe Mestenhauser dedicated his life to these ideals, and it's in this spirit that we come together today to discuss and to build upon his legacy. Here at the US Embassy, we certainly also work on these issues every day, and some of our exchange programs that you may be familiar with, such as the Fulbright program, which he also went on. But we also have many other exchange programs like the Flex program, and we're joined today by Katka, here she is, who manages our Flex program. But we have many other exchange programs that could try to contribute and really achieve these very same goals of increasing intercultural understanding and cooperation in the field of international education. Is anyone new here to the American Center? Is it anyone's first time here? Oh, okay. Well, this is also a center for us, a very important place for us where we conduct a lot of outreach about international education. So we have school groups coming here, so this is also a fitting place to discuss the future of international education, and I really look forward to our conversation today. So without further ado, let's delve into the rich legacy of Josef Mestenhauser and explore the future of international education. So I will pass the floor now back to, I think, our first moderator, Audrey.
Thank you very much.
Děkuji moc.
So thank you very much. My name is Adriana Dergam. I'm helping in operations to the Mestenhauser Institute. I would like to welcome, thank you very much, Monica Davis, for this introduction, for this first drop of the amazing personality of Josef Mestenhauser, Josef, as we can say in Czech. And before we start with the first panel, I would love to introduce a board member, a very honorable scholar, now still working, I would say, Hanneke Tekens from the Netherlands. And let me just give you the biography would be very long, so just the most important. We are very happy she retired from as director from NUFIC, which is the Netherlands Organization for Cooperation and International. I would sit because I see that we have a camera, so if I stand, for the international education, and for her contribution in this field of international education. She has been awarded the title of Knight of the Order of Orange Nassau by the royal family. She's definitely a milestone in international education. So being a member of the board of the Mestenhauser Institute, I would like you to ask to give some words of introduction to the Mestenhauser Institute. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your nice introduction, Adriana. Thank you, Mrs. Davis. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, dear friends and family, it's a great pleasure and honor for me to be here today and to speak the opening words at this special event featuring the Mestenhauser Institute for International Collaboration, MIC. I like the name, MIC. And a special hello, I don't know where to watch, but for those who are online, especially from across the ocean. Today we celebrate the legacy of Joe Mestenhauser, Professor Mestenhauser, here in his beloved Prague, which I think is an inspiration in itself. But I think, like he always said himself, never draw on the past, but look at the future. So I really think what we will look at today is not the past as much as we like to use his thinking and his writings for inspiration, but we have to continue to work across continents, to work across borders, but I think increasingly within borders, because the main challenges in our societies will be within borders, using the knowledge to deal with diversity, cultural diversity, religious diversity, political diversity, and to go forward. Because in all our countries, this is what the coming years will ask for. MIC will in particular focus on this, not only in higher education, where young people are being prepared for the world of tomorrow, but also in other areas like communities, like health workers, the police, diplomats, people who every day in their lives deal with intercultural communication that is not always going very easy. MIC has developed a very special program for teachers in higher education because there is not a blueprint, in spite of how much we would like that, to work on international education, on intercultural communication. You have to find out answers every day, and there's not one answer. It's only answers that you can develop together in groups. MIC is also very important, I think, because it really fills the gap in the higher education system in the Czech Republic. Over the last 2 decades, the Czech Republic has made a tremendous progress in international education in terms of mobility of students, in terms of programs and projects within the EU and beyond. But we have not seen that at one of the universities here in this country has really been developed a center for international education. And when international education grows beyond the first stages, this is really something that is important. because international education is creating a way of thinking rather than just going from one country to the other. It is setting a mind frame, in fact trying to reset your own way of thinking, to reach out to others and to understand that there are different ways of doing things. And that needs a special pedagogy in teachers in higher education, well, in all kinds of education, but certainly in higher education. And MIG provides the platform to do this in a collaborative way. And I would like to really stress the fact that it must be a collaborative way, because to do international or intercultural only within the bubble of your own culture isn't very helpful. But in institutions, it's not only the mobility of students and the international programs that are necessary, but it is also important to make institutional measures and strategies to make international education sustainable. And I think MIG can also be a good partner in this with people from the universities on the level of the management, on the level of leading researchers, teachers, and rectors. Because increasingly, I think universities will be the backbone in our societies to remain open, curious in otherness. And I think it is also important to realize that the role of universities, and in particular the international collaboration of universities, is part of diplomatic policy in all our countries. So, of course, it's very nice, and I can't see who is online, but a special hello to the people in Minneapolis, because MIG is, of course, also a long, long friend of the people in Minneapolis. When the founding director of MIG was a student with Professor Mestenhauser, who was also one of the co-promoters of her PhD. I think the only one at Charles University in cooperation with the US. And it was mentioned already, but I'm also very glad to see my personal friend Tricia Berg Mestenhauser here today, because I think international education, of course we can talk about research and collaboration and student mobility and all that, but it's also about people. So I think it is very important that we also create a community of people around MIG to support the institution and to support the message and the mission of the institution. And to see that we can create a space, a safe space in the Czech Republic for this institution between higher education, between universities, among universities, and in cooperation with universities, but also with others. So I look very much forward to the contributions from the panel, the questions, and I was asked to open this event, and I think in the spirit of the Olympics, which in the end is about peace and collaboration, I try to say it in the way that I now declare this event for opened. Thank you.
And without further ado, let's pass the torch to Patricia Berg-Mestenhauser. Thank you very much, Hanneke Tekens, for the introduction.
Well, as it's been said, my name is Patricia Mestenhauser Berg, and I am Joseph's youngest daughter. I want to start by bringing you greetings from Minnesota. This is an emotional trip for me because it is my first visit back to the Czech Republic since my dad died. I'm proud to embrace my Czech heritage and am actively involved in Czech and Slovak Sokol, Minnesota, as well as the Czech and Slovak Cultural Center of Minnesota, which my dad helped to found. I'm in Prague now, attending a Czech language course held at Charles University, a place very dear to my dad, and I'm in the process of applying for my Czech citizenship by descent. In order to understand my dad, it is important to understand his background, which laid an important foundation for his passion for international education. Born in the mountains in Vrchlabí, Czechoslovakia in 1925, my dad remembered his early years as rather idyllic. He often joked that he was born with skis on his feet. My grandmother wrote in her diary that by the age of 3, Peppa was very independent, energetic, and self-sufficient, attributes that served him well throughout his life. His idyllic world soon came to a halt with the Nazi annexation of the Sudetenland in 1938. With the reopening of Charles University in 1945, my dad began his studies in the Faculty of Law, becoming heavily involved in the Law School Student Association. He never intended to practice law, but rather planned on becoming a diplomat. World events changed everything when, months shy of receiving his diploma, he was arrested on February 24th, 1948, a day before the coup. Officially expelled from the university, he wrote in his calendar journal on 26th of February that he escaped with some intervention by Jan Masaryk. He also noted the funeral of Masaryk on March 13th and his own escape days later into Germany on his name day, St. Joseph's Day, March 19th. Eventually transferred to the Nuremberg refugee camp, he became part of the Union of Czechoslovak Students in Exile, which created an informal international learning center which became known as the Masaryk College of Czechoslovak Students in Exile. Everyone was invited to lecture for each other in order to pass the time, believing they would soon be able to return home. When it became clear that things would not change in Czechoslovakia, my dad accepted a scholarship to study at a small university in the US in exchange for teaching skiing. It was here where he met my mom. Arriving in the US not speaking a word of English, completely cut off from his family, my dad was forced to create a new life in a new world. I can see how these first-hand experiences laid the framework for my dad's heart for foreign students, a passion he clung to until the end of his days. He moved to the University of Minnesota in 1950 and began working at the Foreign Student Advisor's Office while completing his doctorate in political science. While this is a symposium of international education, I must disclose to you that I studied architecture at the University of Minnesota. Though never formally studying international education, I received on-the-job training, growing up immersed in internationalization. From my first memories, my tiny family was expanded to include people who did not look like us, but instead shared the same vision that collectively we could create a better world. I was too young to realize that every time our family hosted foreign students or faculty in our home, we were all developing valuable skills in cross-cultural communications. In 1966, my world was transformed when my dad received a Fulbright scholarship to spend a year at the University of the Philippines. I can hardly imagine the courage it took for my parents to go with 3 kids and my not-so-adventurous grandma on a 14-month-long journey around the world. For the next decades, my dad poured his energies into the field of international education, becoming one of the founders of the Minnesota International Center, now Global Minnesota, lecturing around the globe, writing articles, while always engaging with students. In my adult years, I accompanied my dad on several of his international travels and attended many of his lectures, where I was introduced to the theories behind all the practical lessons I learned growing up. This has led me to recognize 3 attributes of my dad's which have greatly enriched my life. Number 1, my dad was a connector. We used to joke in our family that there was not a place in the world he could go where he didn't meet someone he knew. Perhaps because of his vast network of friends, he became a conduit for connecting people around the globe. I wonder how many of us are connected even here today because of ties to my dad. Number 2, my dad was resilient. Despite the many obstacles he endured, he remained an optimist and had the ability to adapt to constantly changing, often adverse circumstances. In 1991, my dad learned that Charles University was going to hold a special graduation ceremony for those students who were expelled in 1948. After 43 years, my dad received his law school diploma. Later that year, he received another Fulbright grant, this time to return to his beloved homeland. And by April of '98, he was a recipient of the Jubilee Medal for the 650th anniversary of Charles University, having been expelled from the same university 50 years prior. After '89, my dad's worlds opened up and allowed him to fully integrate his worlds. He was finally able to expand his vast global network to include his Czech family and friends. His own Fulbright scholarship gave him the opportunity to create an immediate human pipeline, so to speak, between Charles University and the University of Minnesota, and allowed him to connect scholars and students from universities in both countries. One outcome of this was the coordination of the ProCzech Fulbright Scholarship for Czech physicians to further their research at the University of Minnesota. My dad was also finally able to mentor Czech students, which allowed him to become the advisor to Dr. Eva Janebová, who has become family to me. My dad, number 3, my dad was a leader. One quality of a great leader is the ability to empower others. Over the years, many people have told me that my dad saw potential in them that they did not see in themselves. He saw everyone as an equal and felt strongly that professors had as much to learn from students as students had to learn from their professors. One outcome of this was the creation of the Mestenhauser Student Awards for Excellence in Campus Internationalization at the University of Minnesota. It is an honor for me to attend this annual event and to see my dad's legacy continue to recognize and honor the efforts of students across diverse fields of study for all they are doing at their campuses to make them more internationally welcoming and inclusive. Would it be possible to create a Czech version of this award? My dad truly was my hero. Hardly a day goes by that I don't miss his optimism, perseverance, and wisdom. Even in his last years, as his body was failing, he maintained a positive attitude and often joked, "Some people collect stamps. I seem to collect terminal illnesses." When he realized he would not finish his final book, he gathered a few colleagues together in his living room and turned over to them his manuscripts and latest theories on the future of international education. Thanks to everyone around the globe, and especially the editors who worked so hard to publish this book, fulfilling my dad's final wish. Never say never, my dad would say. He would be thrilled to know that his book was introduced in Prague as well under the auspices of the National Agency. Today I bring as a gift to the American Embassy a copy of this book, and I believe in your folders are bookmarks that I made to honor my dad after this book was published. If my dad were here today, I'm certain he would leave us with a call to action. Perhaps he would challenge us to consider how we can look for the potential in others and help each other see the potential we have that we may not see in ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. And I have seen that our next panelist has been on the photographs already for 2 times, so let me just say more about the founder of the Mestenhauser Institute for International Collaboration, Dr. Eva Janebová, as you mentioned. that thank you very much. We can have the name of the institute that we have thanks to you and the support of your family. Eva has been working in higher and international education for over 20 years, as you will hear her story with Joseph Mestenhauser as a professor, but she has also worked in different places in Czech Republic, different universities. She has served as an academic advisor to the Council for International Education Exchange of the Czech Ministry of Education, and we are happy to have here the Deputy Minister of the Czech Ministry of Education, who will be joining the second panel. And she has led transatlantic projects for academics to become international educators. She has authored and co-authored several books. One of them, the one you have seen here, and that is the gift to the American Center. And she, after gaining the experience from universities abroad and in the Czech Republic, decided to found the Mestenhauser Institute. And thank you again, Hanneke Tekens, for outlining the mission. So, Eva, please share your memories and your experience with Joseph Mestenhauser. It was mentioned several times, but just in a kind of, please fill the other stones of the mosaic.
As Trisha mentioned, I was mentored by Joe Mestenhauser, and now I am actively working to extend his legacy in the Czech Republic. And Trisha talked about her father as a connector, leader, and I'll look at his contribution to international education, some key concepts that we are still exploring in international education and developing further today. Many people, even in the Czech Republic, do not know of the pioneering role that Joe had in international education. And we owe him so much, and it's wonderful that this event can be here and in his honor, actually, and his legacy, and to continue his work. To tell you a little bit about me, I was born in Brno, but my international journey started in 1995 when I was an exchange student in Wisconsin, in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin. And the Minnesota people know in the middle of nowhere means in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin. But I had really amazing teachers, very supportive, very interculturally aware. And at the time I realized I really wanted this international experience for others, for my friends, for everyone to have it as well. So the international experience, so that we can see beyond Brno, beyond our town, our country, and to know the world. My subsequent studies led me to Germany and to New York, and then I ended up in Minnesota, where I met Joe. And as you can see, I couldn't have a more representative and more respected mentor than Joseph Mestenhauser, who introduced me into the field of international education, which has been my focus for the last 20 years. And I have tried to facilitate collaboration and to share my special connection with the University of Minnesota with my colleagues in the Czech Republic, whether it's colleagues from University of Masaryk, Charles University, University of New York, Prague, or Hradec, or Ostrava, or Palacky. So, and I hope that I'll be continuing doing this in the footsteps of Joe being the connector, but also in exploring international education. And what is international education? Actually, it is a discipline that Joe pioneered, but also it has his practice that he demonstrated with his life, both at home, but also at the university. And I would like to focus on three critical concepts and how these three theoretical concepts actually influence practice. First is system thinking. Joe brought system thinking into internationalization. He believed that understanding and changing the structures that are sometimes really not serving us well, including our mindset and mental models. By changing these, we expand the choices available to us and create more satisfying, long-lasting solutions to chronic problems of our universities. And systems thinking really goes beyond checklists. In international education, going beyond checklists is so-and-so Erasmus students we send out away, check. We have so many international partners, check. But for him, he really, I would like to stress that he hated these checklists, and he stressed out that it's so important to involve all aspects of the campus, and that is not easy. So he was trying to, maybe as a metaphor, this system-wide, systemic internationalization would be really looking at the forest and the individual trees, and also what's going on underneath the underground, what is the climate, what is the current weather conditions, and all the relationships between. The next concept that he stressed was culture at the core. Culture can be operating system of our brain. It is a basis for our identity, but it is also a box that sometimes we are stuck in, and we need to leave and transcend it in order to see what is behind the box, outside of the box. And Joe would say, being stuck in the box is a double whammy. People do not know the world outside and do not want to know about it. One of the most frequent sentences that actually I have heard at Czech universities is, "This is the way we do it here, full stop." And in this way, internationalization is an organizational, cultural change, a mind shift that is valuing diversity of thought and experience. Collaboration and inclusivity. Learning from each other with humility, with trust, with respect to each other. I think there is no internationalization without collaboration. And Joe would actually ask, who is not sitting at the table? Are we speaking about students without the students? Who is not engaged in international collaboration? Is it the caregiving PhD students? Is it the disadvantaged students? Is it the first generation students? Who is not there? And how can we create the opportunities for everyone to have the international experience? Even though inclusive internationalization was not coined at that time, it's a term that is quite recent, but I think that Joe actually was thinking and living inclusive internationalization. So these three concepts, and how do they translate to the practice? How do we inform the practice? So how do we know that, how do we recognize good internationalization? First, there is quality teaching and learning that embraces diversity of perspectives and needs, and Hanneke mentioned that. And that requires not just internationalizing the curriculum, bringing new ideas, concepts, literature, but also embracing the pedagogy, the quality pedagogy that really takes diversity as an advantage and utilizes diversity as an advantage in teamwork, for example. Quality of campus community, which is inclusive, values diversity, belonging, and really that requires messaging, that requires intentional cultivating of the culture of support and collaboration and collegial taking care of each other. And thirdly, I would say capacity building, so that everyone, all the stakeholders actually have the knowledge, have the competences and perspectives to be able to engage in international processes and international collaboration. Internationalization is a priority of the ministry. And so how do we bring Joe's complex understanding of international education into the Czech Republic and make it relevant for our universities? since we know that there is really international education is not a field of academic study here yet. And at the same time, we know that our universities must have a body of theory and research, and they deserve to have a body of theory and research in international education so that they can underpin their practices of internationalization. And as Joe said, we don't know what we don't know. At MEC, we are actually committed to extending and continuing the work of Joe in international education. And we work with international collaborating experts here in the room, but also on Zoom, interconnecting experts across borders, but as you can see in the audience, across professions and sectors, from civil society, diplomacy, policymaking sector, and also academia, of course, so that we create the conditions together for a joint understanding of the complexities of international education. And we are deeply honored to be commissioned by the Mestenhauser family to do this in Joe's name and in Joe's homeland. And I'm so grateful to the American Embassy for hosting the event. And I hope this is the beginning of a new chapter of Joe's legacy in the Czech Republic. And with a final call to action from me, let's commit today in the Czech Republic to actively joining the field of international education and working together with colleagues here and abroad to develop new directions and new practices for our universities so that they can maximize the benefits of international collaboration because they need it. Thank you.
And the last to share experience with us is Tomáš Kelvania, visiting professor at New York University Prague and senior international business consultant, because you have also the experience of Joe Mestenhauser as a connector, as a professor, as a scholar. Please.
Thank you very much. It's really great that I can be here. This is really a very emotional event for me. I met Joe in 1990 here in Prague after he returned to Czechoslovakia after 40 years in the United States and elsewhere in the world. He was kind of looking around and trying to meet people from all walks of life, and I was at that time a student at Charles University. I studied journalism, and I was also a working journalist. I worked in the newly liberated media just after the Velvet Revolution, and we quickly became friends. And he asked me to call him Joška, which is actually how he liked to be called. Joška is a diminutive of his first name, Josef. That was very unusual for me at the time because Czech culture at the time was much more formal than it is today. And he was 40 years my senior, and so it was not usual for people like me to call people like him by their first name and by almost like a nickname. But that's how Joe was. He was extremely informal. So I really want to talk about him very briefly, and I want to mention three important elements that relate to his work and relate to his life. The first one is Joe as a bridge builder, because I think that's what he really was. He was building bridges on many levels. He was helping students all over the world, not just Czech and Slovak students in the United States, but I met many students from places like Belarus and Kazakhstan and elsewhere who he was extremely helpful to. And I guess this was really based on his experience as a refugee from communist Czechoslovakia after 1948. So that work as a bridge builder can be, I guess, divided very informally into three levels. One was building bridges between the United States and Czechoslovakia / Czech Republic. which is obviously still very much with us today, and it is very important. At the time in 1990, we didn't know each other that well as we do know today. Also, thanks to the work of Joe, very informal work in education, but also tangentially in politics. He was also able to connect larger worlds, cultural/political worlds, and at the time it was really important to connect the post-communist world in which we were here in Czechoslovakia in 1990, and a free world, the world of the United States and Western Europe and elsewhere, because we misunderstood each other. At the time we had very different frames of reference. And possibly we could use one language, but the concepts we used at the time meant different things, and he was excellent at really explaining to people what these various concepts mean, and so he was really good at connecting the free world with the post-communist world. This is a very important work even today. In my humble opinion, Brexit, the fact that Britain left the European Union, was largely due to this failure of understanding. The Brits did not really understand those post-communists who were suddenly moving to their country and establishing businesses and residence in the United Kingdom. And those new people from Europe, from the post-communist Europe, who were moving to Britain with all their habits and customs, also did not know very well the British culture. It never really worked, and it was one of the key reasons, in my view, for why Britain eventually decided to leave European Union. So you see that these failures on a very elemental level can have dramatic consequences for international politics. Last but not least, he was also a very skilled bridge builder within the Czech and Czechoslovak exile community in the United States. Those of you who have known some people in the United States in the 1990s, Czechs and Slovaks who left Czechoslovakia during the communist regime or even before, know that this was a divided community. There were many factions, political factions, who did not really like to talk to one another. There was a generation who escaped from Czechoslovakia in 1948, like Joe, so-called 48ers. There were people who escaped after 1968, after the Soviet invasion, so-called 68ers, and then there was a huge cohort of people who left, chiefly for economic reasons in the 1970s and on. And many times these people did not really communicate with each other, right? They had different views, and no wonder. For example, some of the people who escaped to the United States and other parts of the free world after 1968 were former communists. They were very, very committed young Stalinists in the 1950s. They were responsible for the expulsion from universities of people who were studying at that time at universities in the early 1950s, or even professors who then managed to escape. And then after 1969, they all met in Germany and France and the United States. There was a very, very sort of significant political tension among these groups. I have never experienced Joe, although he was nominally a member of this 48er generation. I have never seen him bitter about this. He was always extremely generous to all people. He tried to relate to everyone with a very open mind, not naively, but with this very typical American spirit of generosity. And that's why he has become really skilled bridge builder within the exile community in the United States. He could talk to his generation. He could talk to people who fled after 1969. He could also talk to people like me who never fled, but who were in the United States as students. I met him as I said, in 1990, and then I was a student at the University of Minnesota when he was my mentor, and he also helped me with all kinds of other, in all kinds of other ways. I think he was very skilled at connecting theory and practice. Eva also talked about this a little bit. He had a very sophisticated reflection of culture and politics that was, however, extremely useful. That's pretty rare in academics, to do things that are very sophisticated and very nuanced, but also applicable to real life, especially in the sphere of education. Finally, Eva mentioned that he was an informal diplomat in the field of education. I can definitely attest to that, because he was able to move in all circles. He was very at home at a reception with President Václav Havel or Prime Minister Petr Pithart in the United States. But he can also talk to people who were without education or without status on a very equal level. So that was really wonderful. So overall, I think Joe's legacy is important. I don't think it's well known in Czech Republic, and so I really welcome this initiative by Eva and others to establish and foster this institute. And I'm really thankful to be able just, to have a very small part in this. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you also for this, for finalizing, really enriching the picture of Joseph Mestenhauser, but we are still far apart of giving what his impact really was as a person, as a diplomat, as a scholar, as a connector, as an active member of the Czechoslovak community, not only in Minnesota. So before we pass the word to the second panel, are there some comments, someone who would like to contribute, reflect upon what was said, react to anything that was said, or ask anything to our panelists? Anyone? Just raise your hand. We have 2 microphones, so we can pass you the microphone. And also, please, if you turn the camera, we can ask our colleagues online from the United States. Generally, they are thanking to all the speakers for such meaningful reminder of Professor Mestenhauser's vision and our unwavering commitment of international education. Thank you, Thomas. You've always have such pertinent reflection points being said, and also thanking for the call that Eva made and for the contribution of Tricia, saying that was such a wonderful tribute to Joe, Patricia. So thank you very much. Any question, comment?
I just wanted to say thank you for the photographs, especially of hearing the story of when Professor Mestenhauser got his degree, but when he actually got it in hand. I work at Charles University, so this was really beautiful for me to see, and also just to see the legacy of internationalization from hearing his story to being here in the Czech Republic as an Indian citizen myself, and just hearing this transition and this exchange of ideas that's gone over years. So it was really beautiful. I just wanted to say thank you for all the photographs and the whole story.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I would just like to say that it was very important in his life as a lawyer, as somebody who came from the law, once in the United States, to decide not to pursue that career, but to actually switch to education, because he realized that freedom is the most important thing for an individual, and that lawyers cannot free people really in their mindset, but education can. So at actually already quite an advanced age, he changed disciplines, which is a very, very important thing to do. But he really was convinced that that was the reason for people to, and for societies to not only get freedom, but to sustain freedom. And he came to that notion when studying the freedom movement in Indonesia. And he did, and that was a connection also to the Netherlands. He did a lot of research in the archives in the Netherlands, having been the former colonizer of Indonesia. And he, through this research, decided that he could make more of an impact as an educator than as a lawyer. So I think that is also one of the things in his biography that I think is of great importance. Why did he actually end up in education and being an educator?
Thank you very much. Thank you. So if there are no more questions, and I think we are just on time to pass the word to the second moderator and our second panelist. So just let me introduce Jakub Tesar, who will be the second moderator. Jakub is very linked to international education. He worked in Dům zahraničních služeb, the Agency for International Education in the Czech Republic. He was also working for a Fulbright Commission. He met Joe Mestenhauser personally, and I think he will also mention it. And currently he works for Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, so there's a clear link with the United States as well. So Jakub, the floor is yours, and we will just change and liberate. Thank you very much.